This Choircast podcast is brought to you by High Minds. Join host Andy Colenso and Matthew J. DiStefano as they tackle culture, justice, spirituality, and all the big questions shaping our world. High Minds isn't about talking points or hot takes. It's about deep, insightful conversation that inspires and challenges. Tune in to explore new angles, question the status quo, and elevate your thinking. Listen to High Minds wherever you get your podcasts.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
All right. Everybody, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat Turney. I'm here with my brother, John, a.k.a., as always, John Turney. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
And as always, also, hey, wait a minute. You related? It's John, as always. And it's Bethany, as ever, Shea. Say what's up, Bethany.
I'm just confused why you always introduce John first and not me.
He's on my left.
Ladies first.
It's sort of a left to right thing. I'm a little OCD.
Yeah.
Although, if you could see the place I'm living, you would not believe that was true.
Yeah.
I'm
well,
OCD.
hi,
Maybe the OCD manifests itself, and I like to let things stay where they are.
Mm-hmm.
If I drop it, who am I? To impose my will upon that piece of dust.
Yeah, I think that's really wise behavior. So good job on that.
I think so. I've taken that. I've taken that approach with lots of things. Yeah.
Everybody sits in their same pew at church every Sunday, and
right.
we all go to the same spaces as we usually do. We park in the same spots as we can, and
that's right.
Creatures of habit. This one Sunday when my husband was preaching, he asked everybody to get up and move to a different pew, and people were like, can I do that? I mean, it was shocking. And it was like, no one remembers what he preached, but they remember sitting in a different seat.
That was the Sunday they turned the little prayer request cards into comment cards.
Exactly.
Don't ever do that again. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is the podcast, guys. This is the podcast we call This Is Not Church, because if it was church, you would have left long ago. You probably wouldn't have come back. But some of you are just coming back because, why not? Curiosity.
Why not?
Let's see what's going on with those people over there. Well, we're not having church, except we're having church. And today we're going to talk with another awesome guest. And so I will stop yapping and I will introduce Kristin Lee, who's a writer whose work has appeared in Christianity Today and Sojourners. And she's a primary care physician. How do you like that? I upgraded you. A primary care physician serving Boston's Chinatown community. She writes about faith, culture, books, and solidarity at The Embers, and is a contributing columnist to The Covenant Companion. Her passion is highlighting literature written by Asian and BIPOC authors via book reviews and reading groups on Instagram. Lee's work is informed by her experiences as an adoptive mother, host to refugees, and friend to those affected by incarceration. She has a book out. I don't know if it's her only one. She'll tell us all about it, though, called We Mend with Gold, An Immigrant Daughter's Reckoning with American Christianity. Welcome to the podcast, Kristin. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
I'm just excited we made it to the almost 3 minute mark. This is great.
Yeah, there we go.
People listening will never know the travails that we go through to bring you quality. I'm going to stop talking. Anyway, if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself to us a little bit more. Maybe give us a little bit of your background, your faith journey. That would be really, really great. And then we'll just we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Iowa City, Iowa, Midwest, love it. And the faith spaces that formed me were a Chinese immigrant church, which is where my parents attended. And so I, came along and did the whole Sunday school thing there. And then as I became a youth in high school, my Chinese comprehension was not up to speed with the sermons. So I started attending a big white evangelical church down the road. That was, your run-of-the-mill Midwestern evangelical church. So that was how I kind of came to faith. And in college, I was involved in college fellowships and all of that. But I started having a lot of questions and doubts, but the faith in which I was raised was not welcoming of those kinds of questions. And I had no model for how to wrestle with those. And there was a lot of fear as I started having these thoughts about is this really true? So the book arose out of my journey. I guess we call it deconstruction, reconstruction nowadays, but back then I had no language for it and it just felt very lonely and scary. So that's kind of how I arrived at where I am now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there's one sort of unifying sense for those of us who have or are still deconstructing in some way, there is that sense of loneliness in all of it.
Yeah.
Especially if you embarked on this some time ago before we were calling it anything other than apostasy or heresy or whatever else.
Exactly.
Or I'm sorry. What we used to call it, John?
Slippery slope.
Slippery slope.
Slippery slope.
Yes.
Or backsliding. That was my favorite because I was a pretty good backslider. But it's an interesting process. I hadn't really thought about it too, coming out of, in some ways, very homogenous cultures, right? So John and I come from very white evangelical. We would have been the evangelical church you visited and said, oh,
Right.
So they have coffee and donuts after church. That's great. But did you meet with an awful lot of friction coming out of that in your community or from your family in particular? Was it
right
that add to that whole process?
Yeah, what I've learned is that I think even in Asian immigrant church spaces, we adopt a lot of Western theology wholesale, right? We just kind of take it, the entire thing. And we think that to be good Christians, we just have to accept it because that's what the people in power say is Christian theology and doctrine. And we want to excel at that. And we want to, in other parts of life in Iowa, we would try to assimilate, right? And be accepted and belong, just because that was survival for us. But that's the same in the church. Because, our church was a Christian Reformed church. But that had nothing to do with our backgrounds, our histories, the nations that we came from. It was just what was given to us because the pastor that we had been ordained in that tradition. So I found that, even as I have journeyed through deconstruction, the church that I was raised in doesn't have any space for that because it has been this really strict evangelical type of church, that it was kind of, that was handed down to it from Western structures. Yeah.
I'm sorry that you experienced such like a loneliness. I think a lot of people have similar stories of this feeling of isolation, that they are the only one that's questioning the faith that they were handed, the way that they were handed it. And so I'm curious, did you find other Asian American voices in your deconstruction, or did it feel very lonely within that circle even?
Yeah, honestly, it wasn't until very recently, as I started writing the book in the past few years and started being more public about it and interviewing folks, that I found people. And actually, it's been really interesting reconnecting with some of the youth that attended that Chinese immigrant church with me and seeing that their journeys have been parallel too, but because we lost touch, I didn't even know that they were going through that. So during the time when I was going through this, this is like 15, 20 years ago, and I was in college and just out of college. It was a very lonely journey. And it wasn't until I found the writings of women like Rachel Hud Evans or Black Christians like James Cone, Howard Thurman, that I just saw, okay, there's another way. It doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be this extremely rigid dogma. And so that gave me fresh life. And it wasn't until later then that I found Asian American theologians who could speak into that as well.
Wow. And so you went to get a medical degree, and you still kept your faith even while going through all the science classes and everything like that. What was that experience like for you? Or were you able to keep your faith, I guess? Yeah,
I had to kind of silo different parts of myself throughout college. I never believed in like young earth creationism or anything like that. I thankfully had church spaces that weren't so, biblical literalist, that I could believe in evolution at least. But I definitely, put my questions on hold, I would say, during college and my medical training, because I was just so swamped with, getting through the day, and trying to pass my classes, that I did not feel like I had room to question these really fundamental truths that I'd been trying to base my life on. But so it was actually not till medical residency, and I had kids pretty early, and I was like, well, I have kids now, like I have to figure out how I'm going to raise them. And is this faith that I've kind of been holding at arm's length, kind of half-heartedly still going to church, but not really believing, how am I going to raise my kids? I cannot do this inauthentically. And so that was a big catalyst for me to figure things out.
Wow. And so I I would love to talk about the book too, but you decided to write this book, or what made you decide to write this book? This new book that you have out called We Mend with Gold. What made you decide to write this book?
Yeah, I think in part it was that loneliness and that feeling that there was no spiritual resources for me, specifically, I'd say as an Asian American Christian, but just as a person that was trying to find a faith that had some moral and spiritual and intellectual integrity. I know that these days I feel like there's more resources out there for people who are undergoing deconstruction. But back then there was nothing. And so I felt like I really benefited, like I mentioned, from others who had gone before. And so I wanted to kind of compile a lot of some of this writing is much more academic, especially from the Asian American theologians. So I wanted to translate their words into writing that just ordinary people can really access and understand, and help let that be a guide on this journey, and help us to, as Asian Americans and as people who just want to benefit from a different lens, help us to see that there's all these different ways of interacting with God and how we can use our experiences as Asian Americans to understand God and faith.
As you were kind of reaching out and trying to find other resources, you kind of latched onto the BIPOC community as part of your, I don't know if I'd call it a stepping stone, maybe. But what was the reasoning behind that? I mean, obviously looking for people with other voices, but what kind of voices did you get? What kind of voices did you hear? What kind of voices did you grab onto?
Yeah, I think that it really helped me to listen to Black Christians, because it showed me that they can be really faithful in calling out all the sin of the church, right? And it's very obvious when you listen to Black Christians just how warped American Christianity has been historically, right? Like, Christians were supporting slavery and segregation. And so that was just so clear to me that it was okay to call those things out. And so because of that, it was an entry point for me to say, okay, let's really take a hard look at our faith and call out all the things that are really messed up about it, that have nothing to do with Jesus, and are just culturally embedded in our faith because we've just been dominated by white and Western Christianity, or that are warped because people want power and want to hang on to that power and want control. And so Black Christians like the ones I mentioned earlier, but then also Lisa Sharon Harper, Lisa Bowens, Angela Parker, Dante Stewart, so many, Cole Arthur Riley, their voices have just been such a centering place for me and an inspiration and truly prophetic.
In your book, you write about there's a difference between scarcity mindset and simplicity. I'm curious about how you saw that in your own life, and then also how do you walk that road now with your own children and with your own where you're at in your own life?
Yeah. So I write about scarcity mindset because it's something that so many of us as immigrants or immigrant children just grow up with. It's in our very marrow. It was one of the biggest forces that shaped my life was just, we don't have enough. We don't have quite enough. I was never hungry. It wasn't that to that extreme for me personally, but my family, there was always a sense that, okay, we save every penny that we can. Don't spend a single thing extra. And there's something okay with being there's nothing wrong with being frugal, but then there was also the scarcity of opportunity. And so that creates a sense of competition. And so it was okay, well, you want to get into the best college because that'll set you up for the best job, but it's really hard to do those things. So you need to work super, super, super hard and beat out everyone else, right? And so then that does not set you up for healthy relationships with those around you or a sense of contentment or satisfaction. But I do want to teach my kids simplicity, not scarcity. I want them to be content with, whatever God has given us, whatever we have, and to want to give generously to others, because one of my favorite Haitian proverbs is God gives, but God doesn't share. And I think as we look around the world, there's so many resources in this world that we could feed the whole world, for example, but it's unequally distributed. And so I want my kids to understand the privilege that we come from now that, we have financial stability, and to want to redistribute those resources and be a part of making this world a more fair and just place.
Wow. And then so with your kids, I was raised with kind of that scarcity mindset too. As a white person, I had a different experience than you in many ways, less competitive, more afraid of that there's not going to be enough. My mom was raised on a farm where her father lost the farm, and there's just this feeling that there was never going to be enough. And so that frugality was beautiful, and I'm grateful for it. But at the same time, I just see this generation that I'm raising now. I have teenagers, and it's like they have no concept of how to save and how to be content. There's always this sense of not enough of whatever it is that they're searching for. So I'm curious, like, you were raised with a sense of scarcity versus simplicity in some ways within yourself. How do you make sure not to keep that going forward to your children? How do you protect them from that scarcity mindset, but also wanting them to be careful with how they spend and to really seek that sense of purpose in their own life, if that makes sense?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. There's the things that I say to them, which I try to always remind them of just how much we have. And I try to make sure that they know about other parts of the world or even in our own backyard where that's not the case. But I think, even more than all the things that I can say to them, I think being in community with people who are really different from us in terms of financial resources has been really helpful, because, we've lived in our home with refugees that are newly arrived from Haiti and from Afghanistan. And I think my kids really get it. They're like, oh my gosh, these folks are friends, have left behind everything. They start over with nothing. They start with, because of their limited English capabilities, which has nothing to do with their intelligence level, they have to start at really low wage jobs, and how hard it is just to afford an apartment in Boston on minimum wage, right? And so my kids really get that. And so I think that has really helped them to see, oh my gosh, we do have so much. And it's a little bit counteracting what they would see if they were on social media of all the new and shiny things. And so I'm hoping that will stay with them.
Yeah, such an important thing. That was probably the most difficult thing having kids for me, was how do you pass on those lessons that John and I grew up in a frugal, out of necessity household. We weren't poor. I've often made the distinction that we weren't poor, we were broke. An important distinction. We didn't go hungry. Yeah. I don't remember ever going hungry. Yeah. We always had a place to sleep, but there were a lot of hand-me-downs and secondhand things. And my kids are privileged as all hell, just by virtue of the fact that we got a leg up from our folks who sacrificed. I see in your book that you talk about your folks and the things they sacrificed so that you could be successful. But I understand that tightrope walk of teaching our kids to be thankful for the privilege and the step up they've gotten, and also to remind them to reach a hand back and help others out. And that's something I think that sort of transcends any of our communities. But I don't have a question there. I just thought I would say that because I'm looking through your book, and I'm wondering, there's so many great places to jump off. Let's just jump off with the title. I think I get what you're talking about with Women with Gold, but I'd like to hear it in your words, the meaning behind the title of your book.
Absolutely. So the title is inspired by the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is where artisans take a piece of pottery, break it, and then put it back together with gold lacquer. And then the finished product ends up being absolutely gorgeous, and some would argue even more beautiful than the unbroken piece of pottery. And I've just found that to be such a powerful metaphor for me, both spiritually and just in life. I was so afraid to let my faith break apart, but it was only after I let it shatter to pieces that I was able to build something that was actually stronger and more authentic and more true and hopefully more beautiful. And that's true, I think, of all the fractures in our lives. I think both in the American church, which can be quite triumphalist, and even in Asian families, which really want to save face and hide the, broken parts of ourselves. In both of those contexts, I think it's a powerful metaphor to remind us that we can't heal and we can't experience transformation if we don't acknowledge that we have fractures and pain and grief. So yeah, it's been a really grounding image for me to continue to come back to.
Well, I like the idea too, because I mean, I've heard of this before, and a lot of times it comes back to finding beauty in the places where we feel broken. But I hadn't thought about it in terms of what you just said. Like, okay, I had to let my faith shatter to some extent in order to find out where those weaknesses were, and also to highlight even for others, hey, this is the place where I was weak, I broke, but here's some things that are strengthening me. The gold in that, I love the imagery of that, because so much of what I wonder at times if the Asian community doesn't gravitate towards evangelicalism in some ways because of that mindset that's very similar of perfection and success, and if you work hard, that's that sort of mindset of white evangelicals is, God rewards those who work hard. And so that was my sister-in-law is Korean, and I've spent a lot of time with her family over the years, and I've seen that play out with her and with her kids. And she's first generation. Actually, I take that back. She was born in Korea, came to the States when she was very young, and her kids are first generation. But there is that pressure always. It's a pressure cooker of family and expectation, and not feeling like you can be vulnerable about these places where you don't feel as strong. And I saw them gravitate towards churches that fostered that, or sort of bolstered that. I don't know. I guess the question would be: does that make sense? First of all, as an outsider looking in, and is that maybe explain some of the gravitation towards those kinds of dogmatic churches like that?
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And I think it is something that I hope, and that I hope my book helps Asian Americans do, is to reflect and introspect a bit on that tendency, and to realize that when we're truthful about our vulnerabilities, that's what connects us to one another. And that's when we can experience, real life-giving friendships, and relationships. And it doesn't work when we hide all of those things.
Yeah. It's so brave of you to allow your faith just to break apart like that, to see where it was going to go and like come what may. And I don't know, so it seems like you had a lot to lose when you were doing that. Sometimes people will think like, well, I've got nothing to lose, so why not? But you had a culture that you could lose, a family that you could lose, church, a future that was very clear and laid out for you in many ways. And so for you just to like say, it has to be this, that is so brave, and very inspiring.
Thank you. I will say what's maybe not so brave is my parents don't even know that I've written a book. So
okay.
What?
That's funny. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, there's before you give me too much credit, let's just be honest about that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. We can unpack that one.
Well, and they may never find out, right?
And may they never find out. I mean, I think there's good reasons. I've talked it over with, trusted folks. And, I think there's good reasons to try to hope that they don't find out. But if they do find out, I'm prepared for that. I know it's a public book. So if it happens, it happens. But I would love to preserve my relationship with them. And I write about in the book, actually, one of the ways that I've come to figure out how to even have a relationship is just by hiding parts of myself. And I know that that's not always, especially in Western therapeutic models, that's not always not always seen as healthy, I would say. But I think as I read more from Asian mental health resources and read books from other folks, I think that sometimes we just have to do that. There's actually, I don't know if you guys know Lamia H, who wrote Hijab Butch Blues, but she's a devout Muslim and she's queer. And so they write about...
I need that name again.
Oh, yeah. Lamia, Lamya. H is her last initial, and that's how
you said it was.
They write. And the title of the book is Hijab Butch Blues.
Hell yeah.
And I love their book because they write about how they have to hide their queerness, even though they hide their queerness with their family, even as they live into it in the rest of their lives. But that's because they value their familial relationship so much and their faith. And they want to be able to stay in relationship, because if they lose their family, that's their one tie to their home culture. So I think I just really sympathize with that and see a parallel with what I might be hoping to do here.
Well, I mean, there's obviously none of us have the should have the audacity to judge someone for what they do to preserve those things that they prioritize.
Well, I feel that I feel we do that in some ways too. I mean,
of course,
my parents are very, very conservative, and I just had family dinner with them on Sunday, and there's just certain things you just don't talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to keep that familial relationship going. So there's certain things that are just kind of off topic for a while.
Right. Yep. It's very real.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they wanted to know more about the way that you thought, John, or any of us, they'd probably ask. But it's, sometimes at least for me, I had this like righteous fervor to help everybody deconstruct whether they wanted to or not. And I was kind of mean in some ways, being very helpful in my mind, but that can be really damaging to relationships because not everybody is where you are. And to expect them to get there can be really hurtful. So, yeah.
It's definitely different. I wrote a book a couple of years ago. I guess it's been a couple of years now. And I wanted to be very open about my family and the effects, both positive and negative. And then I'm pretty sure my parents read it. They know it was written. I don't know if they sat down and read the whole thing, but I kept going back over going, okay, was I honest about this? I didn't care about, I wasn't concerned about skeletons because we don't have skeletons to speak of, but I wanted to be fair, about the way I represented them. And for better, for worse, I am who I am because of how I was raised and the place where I was raised. And so I get that. I mean, there's a certain amount of self-preservation that kicks in for all of us. And John and I have walked this tightrope for many years now. Trump was the great exposer of holy shit. Where did that come from? You know what I mean? But then I remember in the 90s, I was very, very Republican. I was very right wing. I probably, I took my dad to see Rush Limbaugh in 1992 or something. Oh Lord. I mean, and he probably mourns that. I have to remember that he probably grieves the loss of that relationship, on some level that we don't have that in common. Because we could just gang up on my brother, who was a dirty liberal all those years, hanging out with all this theater people. And, but anyway, I mean, you do what you have to do. And I was going to ask you a question about your foray into sort of Black liberation theology. Did you find some kinship there with people who were speaking that openly about struggles that they had, that you found like at least a temporary home, a sojourn on the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. And I knew that, I'm obviously not Black and I can't adopt their history as my own, but I did see at least they gave me glimmers of hope to how you can have a faith that is liberative, like you were saying, rather than constrictive, and how you can have a faith that moves you into solidarity rather than individualism and isolation. And so I'm so grateful to the writers that I discovered. But then I also was like, okay, at some point I was like, but I want to know, how do people think when they come from Asian backgrounds? And so that's kind of what started me into exploration of Asian American theology and trying to figure out how to reintegrate my own ethnic identity with my faith.
You wrote at one point how the cross, that it used to be seen as like this debt to be repaid rather than a release into new life. How did you escape that perspective of like, that Christ paid it all to him I owe, whatever it is that we have believed for so long? How did you escape that way of thinking from a culture that really, really like pounded that into you to actually seeing this sense of new life? And then what does new life mean to you today?
Yeah, I have to give credit to Daniel Lee, who is a professor at Fuller, who wrote about this concept of, for those of us who grow up in cultures of where the parent-child model is one of parental sacrifice, which begets child obedience, and not just when you're a child, but when you're an adult child too. It's like obedience for the rest of your life because of how much your parents have sacrificed, right? For those of us who grow up in that model, we can come to see the cross as actually a burden and a debt that we have to then repay with our, perfect obedience. And of course, we will fail that. And when he put it in those terms, it resonated with me so much because I was like, oh, like that's so true. And I had never conceptualized that before. And in terms of how to break free from that, I think one is just even realizing that that's part of how I was raised and it's so deeply ingrained in me. So I think just seeing that pattern as one, how I relate to my parents, making sure that I don't transfer that onto how I relate to God. But I think, what has helped me a lot in the recent years is living into just unconditional belovedness. And I think I wasn't grounded in that growing up. Like, our churches preached a gospel of grace, but we didn't really act like it, right? Like there was still very strict standards of behavior. And when you deviated from those standards, you knew that you were in trouble. So I think at least the way I try to then parent my children is truly like, just what is grace and what is unconditional love? And I'm still learning it. And so I have to apologize to my kids all the time when I'm like, I have fallen short of that, but I'm learning alongside you. And so I would say I'm not like 100% there yet. And it's probably something I'll always have to continue to work on to learn. But I just reminding myself that being centered in my belovedness is the only way that I can then live healthy outwardly. That's the main thing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you're an adoptive parent too?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever found people, I'm also an adoptive parent, but have you ever found people saying that your children should be so great gratitude, like full of gratitude because because you rescued them, and then they have a debt towards you or anything,
right?
Or like how do you navigate those weird Christian waters that are so murky?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I could go on forever about adoption and like the Christian narrative around adoption because I think it's so harmful. But yeah, people do say the wildest things, and it is a narrative that I've had to unlearn as I've parented. We have 2 biological and 1 adopted child. But it, I think that the Christian idea of like, oh, you're saving the child when you go and adopt them, or like you're providing an opportunity for the child to like then get converted to Christianity. That's like so harmful, like the wrong motivation, right? Exactly. Yeah. Vomit. And adoptive parenting is no joke. I mean, I'm not going to go into that here, but it is so hard for many, many reasons. And we just have to remember that these kids, they start their life with loss and grief, and trauma. And adoption is not rainbows and unicorns because it always starts in loss and grief and trauma. And yes, there can be redemption, and yes, there can be beauty through that. But minimizing that pain that our children have to go through, and then just like lifting ourselves up as saviors is just such the wrong way to look at it.
Yeah. It's so gross how Christianity has done that in the past. And I think a lot of it comes from this place that like a merit-based theology where if I do this good thing, then God's going to be more pleased with me and I'm going to be in God's good graces a little bit better. And adoption has been like almost fetishized in the Christian church in some ways, like you're rescuing kids and bringing them into the kingdom of God. And if you do that, then God's going to be even more pleased with you. And it's that whole thing that you deconstructed of like the cross is a debt to be repaid because we're trying to like work our way up to God's good graces by doing this. And then we place that same burden upon our children, whether they're adopted or biological. And we just like keep that cycle going. And it's so beautiful when people can break out of that cycle and see that they are unconditionally beloved, whether they've done anything in that sort of, that way that God sees you or not. Like God always sees you as beloved, just like you see your kids as beloved.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
That's incredible. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. You also mentioned at one point, like the difference between the older brother with the prodigal son and the younger brother. And just, how often we see that in the church as well, as like, well, you've got these great Christians who have always been there. They've never doubted their faith. They're always certain, and we hold them up on a pedestal. And then you've got the rebellious ones that left, but at least they came back. But what about the ones, that don't come back? Like, how do we go to them? How do we like create spaces, especially within the cultural circles that you're in? How do we become the kinds of people that can bring the goodness of the Father to them instead of waiting for them to return? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Oh, that totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. I think, one thing I've learned is when I don't have an ulterior motive in my friendships and relationships, it works much better. Cause back in my, college days, high school days, like we were so focused on, are you gonna like convert your friend, like bring them to church, like bring them back into the flock if they've left or if they're backsliding, right? This was like you were saying before, like it was merit before God if you were able to like be the one who could lead someone to Christ. But in terms of, what you were just asking about, what about the ones who've left and never come back? I feel much more authentic and genuine in my friendships and relationships now that I'm not concerned with the state of anyone else's soul, right? Like I can just be present in those friendships and love them and appreciate them and enjoy my friends, whether or not they're, part of the church or not, whether they identify as Christian or not. And I think that what it means to manifest Jesus' love is to love people without strings attached, without wanting to coerce them into, coming back to the church or believing in any set of doctrines. So I think that especially evangelicals, right, need to let go of that need to always be like, is your soul okay with God?
It is well with my soul. Yeah. I know you were concerned. I could tell. Yeah, that's such an interesting dichotomy there of trying to be welcoming and trying to be there for people, and also trying to hold fast to those things that you think are important. Talk about that in terms of upward mobility. That I was reading through some of your book, and there was like this. There's a chapter heading or a title heading on learning a theology of upward mobility. And I think that's something that's sort of pervasive church-wide, but might be something that's particularly pervasive in certain communities. Does that stand up as true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and I'll say I totally understand why my parents' generation or, first-gen immigrants get really wrapped up in upward mobility, because they had to leave so much behind and they came here with very little or nothing, and they're just trying to establish stability for the next generation. So I do not begrudge them at all for, all the hard work that they did. And I'm grateful for that. But I do think that it can get out of control when they, when we get pushed or we push ourselves to just achieve more and more and more because we think that will make us more and more and more secure. Like if our security is from excellence and achievement, that we're never actually going to feel secure then, right? Because something can always happen. But then the other thing is that I noticed in Asian immigrant church spaces is it can get glossed with this Christian language that kind of justifies why we need to be excellent. And the phrase that I was always taught is, if you are successful in this world, you'll be a better witness for Jesus. And like, even back then as a youth, I was like, really? Like, I don't think that's true. Like, that's not what the Bible that I'm reading says. But it was very much a belief that was passed down to me. And so I was encouraged to excel in every single thing that I did so I could be a good witness. And that's just so damaging, right? Like, one, because it's not true and it ties up people's belovedness with their worth and their success in the world, which is just not healthy. And it doesn't make space in the church for people who just, aren't going to be successful in the world's eyes, which is just so sad.
Which is so many of us. It's like you've just excluded most of us from this. Right. Not you, but they have done this. And,
right.
But that's there's so much of that teaching that goes on. That was one of the things that I remember dabbling for a time in the so-called prosperity gospel. And I remember just the weirdest stuff, man. Guy from Detroit his name was, doesn't matter, but he was a white preacher who gave himself the title of bishop, which I thought was hilarious. But he was the pastor of a huge black church. And he admonished us all to be successful, because who would want your broke ass Jesus? And he said that from the pulpit, as he's bragging about, all of his possessions and the things he has that attract people to go, well, I want to have that kind of gospel experience where I also I can have a summer home and, multiple, sports cars. And, but it was, even when I was more gullible, it just was so off-putting to me. I do like the way you framed this. I feel like a lot of your book is framed in this way, deconstructing as unlearning, as trying to strip away layers of things that we've been indoctrinated with. And that, say what you will, take the compliment if you will, but I think that is brave. I think that requires a certain amount of courage to say, I'm gonna let go of all of this certainty and see what remains, and see where God shows up to be that gold filler that might bind up those places where you're broken and be the strength. I just love it. I just think it's, anytime we can bridge those gaps and start to see commonality, that our experiences are largely similar, not the same, obviously, but I think we can find more places of parallel than not. So I don't know. What other kinds of things, and this is a very, forgive me, a very broad question, but what other kinds of things have you found yourself trying to unlearn, or being sort of, what's the word? I'm sort of deliberate about saying, okay, that needs to go or be reassessed. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think in this journey, I think I needed to unlearn certainty, right?
Amen to that.
That was one of the things that I was taught is important. Like, you need to be certain in your faith, and, certain of, there's a right answer to every single question, right? Like, here's the book on apologetics, and you learn those answers and then you're good. But that's just not true. How can God be contained? If you believe in God, how can God be contained in these paragraph long answers about different things? Like, I think leaning into mystery has been just really life-giving, because I want to know what's true, but there's certain things that I will never know, like the actual answer. Like, I still don't understand free will and predestination, and I never will. So I think that just becoming comfortable with uncertainty and with mystery has been a big part of the journey as well.
Do you naturally think in more like black and white ways, or have you always kind of been somebody who's able to see gray a little bit easier?
I think I was taught to try to see everything black and white, but I think one of the reasons why I felt this dissonance in my faith is because I tend to see gray. I think maybe, I'm not sure if it's empathy or just really being able to put myself in other people's shoes. Like, once you can do that, right, and you see all these different viewpoints, then a lot of the world becomes a lot more gray. Versus if you just say, I'm going to adopt this one viewpoint, this very narrow lens, then you get stuck in these more rigid boundaries. Yeah, but I've always been drawn to the gray. I love the gray.
I'm kind of wondering if some people are just born with those ways of thinking already innate within them. And so those that deconstruct, or are more likely to deconstruct their faith, have always been the questioner anyway in the family. They've always been the one that has pushed the boundaries and usually has more empathy and needs to see things outside of the black and white. I'm working with a woman right now who is she's brand new to Christianity, and I'm a local pastor, and she's just like, I can't see things like you see them. And I'm just like, but there's no answers here. It's just walking in relationship. What do you mean? And she's just like, I need an answer. I crave it. I can't not have an answer. And so maybe she might be better in a church that gives answers, even though I think the gray is so beautiful. Yeah. I don't know. I just think
I'm going to go on a limb and say no.
Okay. Keep talking, Nat. What do you mean?
Well, because that certainty is temporary. It's always, until it's replaced with the next bit of certainty.
Yes.
It's always tenuous at best, That was, I think what you said is true. I do think there are people who are predisposed to see the world that way. It played out like that in our family. I was the rule follower in a lot of ways. And John's shaking his head, probably at least internally going, well, John was the guy, he was the guy in, elementary school, Sunday school, asking questions like, really? 2 of every animal? How big was that boat again? How come the lions didn't eat the giraffes? What the hell is going on? They were actually asked to have him stop asking those questions. But I did dove in. I think this is a path that a lot of us take. I dove into apologetics pretty hard for a while. And it was that need for certainty, that need to have an answer. And it was a biblical mandate. I was supposed to be prepared at all times to give a reason for the hope that was within me. I didn't read that correctly for a long time. And I read that as I must be prepared to give an answer for all of the hard questions in the Bible.
Right.
And some of which have no good answers. Rather than, well, I don't know the answer, but for some reason, this stubborn hope won't go away. And I don't know that I have a good reason for that. But that's played out, quite a bit in our lives where, I don't know, there were certain things you said you never really bought into, like young earth creationism. Our parents never really pushed that. Our church probably believed it. I mean, I'm sure we were all biblical literalists to some extent, but that was a fairly easy thing to shed.
Right.
Really 6,000 years. I mean, the Egyptians have records that go back farther than that.
Right.
Hello, you come from a culture that can trace its written records back to way before that. So there has to be some amount of skepticism that says, no, that can't be true. And that just opens you up. In a way, I see the slippery slope less as a danger, more of like remember the slip and slide when we were kids? I think it's fun. It's like, let's see where the slippery slope takes us and what's the next pool. But as you go through this process of unlearning, have you had to battle that tendency to maybe find certainty in other places? Does that make sense? Like even finding certainty in your uncertainty can sometimes be problematic.
Yeah, that's true. And I definitely, this may not be where you anticipated this going, but, I am in like a good amount of like secular kind of activist spaces. And there can be a different kind of certainty in those spaces about who's right and who's wrong and whose viewpoints should be platformed and we should never hear from. And so I am, because of my experience in more fundamentalist church spaces, I kind of recognize a tendency towards that, even on the far left. Even as I appreciate those spaces, it's not that I don't, but I think we have to sometimes be careful. I think it's just a human tendency, right? To like want to have us versus them. People are better and those people are not as good, and dehumanizing others. So I think I'm just very sensitive to that, and just want to watch out for that.
Same, 100%.
Same. It's an easy trap to fall into, Now, I said that, and you went exactly where I thought you might. That was exactly right. But I have found myself, I don't know. I guess there is a tendency to grasp for some kind of certainty, even amongst the uncertainty. And so I've had to have voices around me, that people that I read or that I listen to who are like, it's okay to say I don't know. That's a very honest and genuine answer to, some of these more difficult questions that I think you and I agree. There's some things that are just flat unknowable. And it's okay to say I don't know. And that doesn't have to stop you from moving forward. Matter of fact, the greatest impediment for me was that, that inability to decide, So I'm like, well, where do I fall on this? And at some point I decided I don't care. I'm going to take the next step and it'll reveal itself or it won't, and that's okay. But that's what I...
It just reminds me of like when Jesus was telling like hard things, like, I don't know, eat my flesh, drink my blood or something like that. And everybody's just like, peace out. I am done. I can't be here. And
I would have been one of those.
Yeah, and Jesus is like looking at Peter and a few other disciples. He's like, why aren't you leaving too? And Peter's like, I don't know where else to go. Like you have life and it's weird and it's uncomfortable and I don't understand it, but I haven't found anything better. So I'm sticking with you. And I think like that's part of this whole uncertainty thing. I don't have answers all the time. All I know is that with Jesus, there's life. And I'm going to answer that I don't know most of the time, but I'm going to keep following because that's where I found goodness to flourish.
Yes. Oh, I love that picture. It's beautiful.
I'd have been out.
Now it's like, peace, I'm done. This is too confusing.
I'd have I'd run down the dusty streets yelling "Cannibal!" He's weird. I did like that though. I mean, I like that about Jesus and his ministry. That was always like, "Hey, I'm getting too popular. I need to say something a little crazy." But the other thing I wanted to touch on before we run out of time, though, was this idea of patriarchy, because you write about that in your book as well. And I think that's a pervasive American problem. Is that something that you see specifically through the lens of Asian American culture? That is it a much more patriarchal society, or did it find a home there and say, oh yeah, okay, this is how the family should be structured?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, Asia is so diverse, and so each nationality and ethnicity has varying levels, I would say, of how patriarchal those societies are. And funnily enough, in China, because of the communists, that it's a much more egalitarian society now, even as it's right now very authoritarian and has other issues, but it's very egalitarian in terms of, like men and women both being valued and working. That being said, though, just in my reading and research, for sure, I think that Asian American or Asian immigrant churches can fall into the Western patriarchal church structures that we've kind of been brought into. And like, I think back today of the church that I grew up in, this Chinese immigrant church, and the white evangelical church that I went to in high school. Both of them, the elder boards are still completely male, right? Like no women pastors, and it's like 2026, and I'm like, what's going on, guys? Like, I mean, maybe I've been in Boston for too long, but what are we doing? And it's crazy to me because I work in medicine, and in the field of medicine, women can do whatever men can do, and in research, sometimes they do it better. Like they compare women surgeons' outcomes with male surgeons, and if not better, at least as good in terms of their patient outcomes. And so it's just mind blowing to me that we've lived in this paradigm for so long. And I really hope that we can break free of it. I think that the Asian American community, and my generation, I think we for sure have questioned and pushed back against it. But in church spaces and in immigrant church spaces too, I think unfortunately there's a lot of synergy between some Asian cultures, not all, some Asian cultures that are patriarchal, and then the Western theology that we've inherited.
Yeah, it seemed like it might have been, at least on some level, a fairly inviting place to say, hey, I told you, put the men in charge. It's such a weird thing. That's just for many of us, that was, it's the way we were indoctrinated. It's the way we were raised. It's the way our families were structured. It's the way our churches were run. I actually left the church when I was in my 20s because they had a female pastor. And I was like, you understand, of course, that women are supposed to be silent in the church and don't know what you think you're doing teaching the men folk. But I've grown up since then. It is such a cool process, though. I like that. For maybe you can resonate with this. For me, it feels like an ongoing process, one that we probably won't finish anytime.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so to have voices like yours that come along speaking for your community, and also finding places of parallel with nothing but compliments for the book. I hope you have a ton of success with it.
Thank you. Yeah,
Bethany, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the things that I've been really grateful for, and that, like you mentioned, it is an ongoing journey. And one of the things that helps me make sure that I'm hopefully journeying in a good direction is just making sure I'm surrounding myself with diverse voices. And by that, I mean, not just racial diversity, though that is really important, but just like diversity of church backgrounds and traditions, class diversity, like gender and sexuality. And so I think when you read scripture with people who are really different from you, you get you get so much more richness, but then you also don't fall into traps of monolithic thinking. And so I really appreciate what you guys are doing with having so many different kinds of guests on your podcast and having me on, because I do think all this cross-pollination is really important for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's the best part of what we do. It really is. We look forward to it every week because you just never know what kind of cool person you're going to meet. So thank you so much for that. John, Bethany, any parting wisdom before we say goodbye?
Just thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk with us. This has been an amazing conversation. Really enjoyed it, every bit of it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kristin. And how can people find you? Are you on social media or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I review books on Instagram. It's like my joy and passion. And my Instagram account is KT Lee, Lee .writes, as in writer. KT Lee writes. I have a Substack, which is The Embers, and then I have a website, so people can look me up there.
Awesome, thank you. And what is the name of your book again for everybody to know?
It is called We Mend with Gold, an immigrant daughter's reckoning with American Christianity.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.